Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Missing Link in Your Healing. This is the podcast where we bring you the parts that you might not necessarily know or that aren't obvious to you. You might really not know that you need them to heal. We pride ourselves on being holistic and bringing different pieces of a puzzle to broaden your mind so that you can help yourself heal from within. Healing is an individual and very multifaceted journey. So we want you to take away what resonates the most with you so that you can become your own healer from the inside out. And I'm very excited today that divine providence, it can only be providence, that gets two people to meet over a jar of blueberry jam in my favorite health shop in the city. And that was only a week ago. So my guest today on our podcast is Ryan van Geems. Ryan is a 31-year-old man who recently arrived in the Eastern Cape, where I live, from the Western Cape, from Cape Town. I'm going to allow Ryan to introduce himself and tell his story, but I'd like to just start off by summarizing his story of physical illness to true healing, because this story of Ryan speaks to every single aspect of what Loretta and I believe in and put out on our podcast. So thank you, Ryan, for showing up today. I'm very excited. At age 24, Ryan had a severe health crisis and it stopped him in his tracks. He was puzzled. He was young, but he was also living a very clean, active, and healthy lifestyle. He started focusing on becoming even more healthy. And of course, he consulted doctors and started taking various types of medication. But despite this, his chest and lung issues got worse and worse to the point that he needed a lumbar puncture. So one day he sat down and decided that in order to heal, he needed to take stock of his life. He asked himself the question, what direction is my life taking? And is this the direction? What direction is my life taking? And is this direction the one that I really want to be in? Where am I lost? Where am I not treating myself well? The realization came to him that he needed to do some deep inner work. He saw that the person he was becoming was not the person he wanted to be. And because of this, he was not at peace. And this is why he was sick. He started a journey for him that led to, in his words, ego death and finding his true essence, his God self. He saw during the self-reflection the many layers of coping mechanisms and false characteristics he had layered over his authentic self. He knew he had to peel back these layers that he had subconsciously built up over the years. Each layer took him to a point of understanding, and as it revealed fears and unresolved trust that he unknowingly had in the world. He came through this process with a deeper understanding and sense of himself. This journey returned him not only to full health, but set him on a path of starting his life on a clean slate. To quote him, this internal battle and journey had revealed itself in my body and my physical health. This is because our physical self is a personification of our mental state. All the symptoms of unhealthy spirit and mind will manifest in our physical world. So Ryan, with that, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and to share your story with us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's spot on in terms of an overall as to an experience from someone relatively young. But I'll say that the experience that I had and the time that it took for me to realize certain things, most would say, is quite fast, but it's nothing that I can take full credit for myself. When we're in a moment where we realize our health has really caught up to us. And I say that in that way because our health, in terms of our physical health, is very much a reflection of the way we treat ourselves. But it's not just, people will refer a lot of it to the food, like we said. It can come back to diet and things, and we think we can fix it from that point. But I grew up in Cape Town in a healthy place, along the beach side, a lot of beautiful space to enjoy and take in, but energetically as well, we forget just how we treat ourselves on the inside and out. And through my journey, I came from a home which was atheist of background, essentially. So I didn't have any mantras or anything specific to live by or live for, let's say. But I had a beautiful upbringing in terms of my family was very health oriented. It was very much about physical well being. So I served a lot. I ate good food. I was active in work, so I worked pretty hard. So there was no reason for me to not feel fulfilled in so many different ways. But I came to realize that the reflection that comes from our physical self as a personification of the way we treat ourselves and our mental state, just how we feel essentially towards ourselves, is very much a reflection of how we treat ourselves and how we think of ourselves. And if we're not harmoniously acceptant of who we are and able to move along with ourselves through life, then we can see a lot of these things start to spring up and become a part of our lives. Unlike, I would say, a mirror that tends to do things on a scale that is very instantaneous, we end up with something that happens that's rather takes its time. So you might not see it, but the little things start to pile up and start to become something that is unrecognizable to us, symptoms that start to be corrosive towards us, essentially, and start to do things that we might not understand. It makes it quite difficult as well for most to then link things together and say, well, this is because I've treated myself badly in this way. Because, if you take a flame to the skin, you can see directly straight away where you burnt yourself and you can link the time very, very well. Whereas that where you treat yourself badly and you manifest these things. And when I say manifest, I mean you just keep thinking, let's say, badly of yourself, or you treat yourself badly, or you reject certain parts of yourself. Those things won't surface as quickly as a burn on the skin, but they definitely will. They definitely will. They will with time. And we all think that we might be healthy. And like I said, for years, I felt very healthy. I felt very strong. I felt very, maybe even just complacent. That's basically maybe the best way to put it within my body and self and mind. But in actual fact, there was a lot of healing that needed to take place. There was a lot of things that I knew were building up deep inside of me, a lot of unsettlements. And I thought, as long as I'm eating well and I'm doing the healthy things, I shouldn't have any problems really. But, as it was pointed out, unfortunately, I did. I felt very, very sick. And I was surfing at the time. I was very active. Um, and during this time where I felt sick, it was quite inescapable for me to let's say, not seek help. One of the main things was to say, I need help from some kind. I can't deal with this on my own. I definitely can't make anything of this just by myself. I'm going to need to get some help from some side. The funniest thing was, or let's say the ironic part was, is I didn't feel very much like it was going to be a be all and end all resolution when I would go to see the doctors. So I had antibiotics and it would take care of the symptoms. And I only started to understand that much later on. It definitely helped me with the symptomatic parts of everything. So I felt better, and my chest would subside in terms of infection, and I would have a week of good health, or 2 weeks, maybe three at max. But then I would have another 7 days where I would get beaten down again, and my chest would just not be at the great space. And that affected my entire body. I would fatigue, I would deflate essentially. The best way I could put it was it felt like I was trying to put pieces of sticky tape on one of those little inflatable pools where lots of little holes just kept popping up, and my aim was to try and keep the body of water. But it was inevitably, it was just not working. You're trying to pump and put little pieces on, but you realize that it's not, there's nothing wrong with the tape you're using, there's nothing wrong with the pump you're using. It's the fact that you have to keep pumping and have to keep putting on the little pieces of tape. There's something wrong with that picture, essentially. So with that in mind, at some stage I could not escape the feeling that there was just wrong, ill treatment towards myself, from myself, that was taking place. And that definitely not only had to do with why I felt the way I felt, but my mental state, my emotional state towards myself, and my relationship with myself essentially was the main cause. Instead of dealing with symptoms, which what I realized very much the antibiotics did, despite all the damage those kind of medicines can do to us, at the end of the day, it was very much just treating symptoms. So it was quite a high cost for something rather symptomatic. When it got to the point where I did decide, and it wasn't even a decision, it's more a moment where we realize you can't do this to yourself anymore. You sit there and you realize, you say, this is not right. There's something, there's a part of myself. I've gotten up to deal with this in lots of different ways, but there's a part of myself that's still seated too comfortably in the couch, and that needs to stand up for oneself. And I need to find out what part of myself is that. And that was very much an emotional journey, and I could feel that was an emotional journey. And it's difficult to say, like, how do you start with that? But one of the first things that was easy to recognize was that I wasn't happy or at peace with the person I was creating at the end of the day. And I felt that at the end of the day, I wasn't taking full responsibility for the creation that I was, or that I was becoming, because that was the main thing, is that I felt very much responsible for where I was. I didn't actually have many people to blame at that point. I thought, I've done everything, I followed all of the good habits my parents have, relayed to me. I haven't followed a lot of the evil of society. When I say evil, I mean I didn't go out and drink at this stage heavily to the point where I was battering my body or doing anything like that. Or it was very much just a point of saying to myself, okay, well, if it's not out there and it's still this bad within my physical health, then I definitely am affecting myself in ways that I cannot hope to understand. And I need to understand these things. And essentially, it just comes down to needing to understand myself. So I decided to take a look, say, okay, let's unravel this a little bit and let's try and understand. And that point, we say, comes from the ego death, because it's almost a best way for me to put it. It's almost like standing in the mirror after you're upset and emotionally bound, and you say to yourself, I don't want to be this character anymore. This character that you've created for us to survive this world, it's not harmonious or at peace or wholesome like we intended to be, because we can all reflect on that and say that we want to be wholesome and good and kind, not just to ourselves, but to others. But at a very good start to ourselves, we wanted to enjoy our experience. So why are we not enjoying it? And why have we created a character essentially that is, corrosive to that very essence that we started off with? And at that point, I realized, okay, well, I can already see that I'm creating a character essentially. So this is more of a character than really who I am. This is rather a facade. We can speak about the mask we put on every day before going out and dealing with the world. But it very much was that. It was a layered mask, very much like a pearl. I had decided, okay, I don't want to just be small and insignificant baby Ryan anymore. I want to have, essence of beauty. But it was very much layers of things that maybe other people had told me were important or great about me. Rather egotistical, rather to say, to be honest. And it was layers and layers of these things that I decided to keep. I use the analogy of saying, for example, we can all relate to the one chap who's at the at the braai or the barbecue or get together that is in shorts and a t-shirt, and it gets cold, it gets late, and the night goes on, and someone eventually says, "Oh, surely you must be getting cold. Don't you want to get a jersey from your car or something?" And you end up saying, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine. No, I don't get cold. I'm in shorts always. I don't. I'm like barefoot and in shorts and in a t-shirt always. Or I don't have any problems with that. And that becomes part of your characteristic, and then you'll be like, to the point where even in a social gathering where you don't have to be there, and someone could say, that chap Ryan, he never gets cold, and that becomes one of your defining characteristics, part of your little entourage of characteristics that makes up you. We tend to get rather attached to those things because society tends to recognize us well that way and define us well that way. And it creates boundaries that are a lot more tangible for the rest of the world to see because we understand someone who doesn't get cold easily. But try and understand someone who's within balance and peace with oneself. That's very different to try and integrate into a social environment. So um, I sat down there and I said, well, let me take a look at how many of these layers there really are. Now, the truth is we can already establish that you can't just box things into good and bad or black and white and just say that this is how things are, and that I'm gonna just sort all of the bad things out of myself and then keep all of the good things, and then I'll be a good person. And that's just how life will be. Um, I'd say the truth of that is very much then you're looking at having to pretty much go out into the world and go into a Tibetan mountain, forget everything, and strip yourself of everything. That's pretty much what you're going to have to go through in order to get your clean slate. But and even then, that's going to take years at the end of the day. Where I now know that, for example, in order for me to go through my journey, in order for me to actually understand these things without being able to take on the Tibetan mountain and getting rid of one's idea of self, I could start somewhere though. And it was that there's very much these layers. So how do I come to understand what is a layer and what is truly who I am, you know? And for example, I found that within a social interaction, I could choose to understand myself as a stranger, maybe even. I could come to get to know myself almost as a stranger. And the way that that works is not by sitting in front of myself and asking myself questions. The way that this came to be is rather to observe myself while I would interact with someone else, actually. So it would actually rather to be to speak to a friend or be in a social environment. And really, this does come to a point where you enter the social environment saying to yourself, okay, not only I'm coming here to get to know people, but I'm coming here to get to know myself. That's a very important starting point, because you have this deep connection psychologically straight away. These little fears: will people accept me? Will I be acknowledged for who I am? Will I be valuable to the social environment, or am I just going to be a prop in the background? And that manifests straight away into a physical self. You get agitated. You can be, picking at a bangle or something, and we find all of these little weird little coping mechanisms in order to get rid of the jitters and things. But I think it's important to realize that these jitters and things are important. We mustn't. It's not good to actually just reject oneself and say, well, because I've got anxiety going into a social environment, um, I'm a bad person, or I'm just not good for social, let's say, social sides of things. We all have to start somewhere. We all have to grow, essentially. So we have to accept where we are, because otherwise, if you don't accept where you are, you're going to start building from a point which is not you. And that's, the greatest way to start disconnecting from oneself is to just decide that you're not who you are. So I would go in to a social environment and I'd say to myself, okay, I'm going to be conscious of who I am and not just respond to what anyone has to say. So if someone had to say, like, how are you doing? Um, most of the time I'd say like, oh, I'm great. I'm doing epic, how are you doing? And that would be my standard way of replying. And I realized that, you know what, I actually would say that in times where I wasn't epic and great. And it was actually just an automated response. It was a plug and play system. And myself and the person in front of me were almost locked into a predetermined dialogue for the first little bit until we really got to a point where we're going to speak about who we really, really were and what we were really going through. And, and it's funny because you can say, like, hey, how are you doing? And instead of just, instead of having someone just reply straight away, we can process that and say to ourselves, well, how do we feel right now? And you can feel the emotions. And maybe it's very brutally honest, or maybe it's a bit weird, but you could say, well, I'm feeling quite anxious. I'm feeling quite anxious because we're in a social environment and I'm going to get to know a few people. I don't know those people in the corner there. So I'm a little bit anxious, a little bit shy, but I'm all right. How are you doing? And there's a much more, by verbalizing it as well, there's a much larger scale of acknowledgement for both yourself and the person in front of you, understanding where you're at essentially. And that in itself isn't going to take away the jitters or anything like that, but it can add let's say, a giddy or joyful side to the fact that you've accepted yourself very much so. It's almost like embracing yourself in that moment and saying, this is who I am and I'm okay with that. And I'm very happy with that. I would say a lot of people can say that subconsciously we choose to deal with these things from a very young age. We don't realize it, but from a very young age, we start creating these coping mechanisms. And it can start at an age, it will start at ages where we do not remember. We can't, just dig back and get that idea. It'll start at of ages where someone will say hello to us, or we'll go and say hello to someone as a little one, and not know that they're having a conversation with our parent, for example, or someone else, and then we get ignored for quite a while. And then we sit there as little ones saying, I wonder why Uncle so and so doesn't consider me important anymore. And, at that point, we start to have these doubts about ourselves. And, maybe I need to run up and punch him in the leg next time or something like that. And now I'm upset and I'm going to kick him, my uncle, instead because he hasn't said hello to me. But I'm not taking into consideration that there's two different realities happening at the very same time. He's having a conversation with my parent or someone, and I'm trying to have a conversation with him. Now, I haven't learned my social cues all too well, and that's something I don't understand, but I'm going to develop something about that anyway, a complex of some sort or an understanding of some sort, and that's going to carry on with me. The older I get, I'm not going to analyze everything from when I was 7 every single day, all the way through from when I was tiny, all the way through until my age now of 31. I'm definitely not. So these things happen in a lot more automated way. So, for example, one of the easiest ways for me to explain this to people is, for example, if you had to throw someone an apple, with a good given time, if they're looking at you and you throw them an apple, after they catch the apple, you're going to ask them, did you decide to catch the apple? And you'll see most of them will say, well, I didn't really think about it. I just caught it, and now I can really analyze the situation. But I didn't really say, should I or should I not catch the apple? They're going to catch the apple. It's an active response. So it's something that happens whether we like it or not. Another way for me to explain this is to say the word beach or mountain. Within that brief moment, the beautiful subconscious, connect itself, just analyzed everything to do with the beach, the mountain, and it evaluated your relationship with those things, how safe you are, how happy you are with those particular settings, and it established where you were with life, essentially in those ways. So with that in play, this happens all the time. We're analyzing absolutely everything, every social cue with everyone around us, everything that they're saying, and we build up emotion. The only thing is that we don't really observe that though. We'll just react. We'll say, I feel offended or angry, so I'm going to say something about that emotion that I have inside of me. But we do forget that it's very linked now to who we're standing in front of just for this very moment. And it's a very momentary thing. So I was able to rather stand back and say, okay, let's see how much of my character, so to speak, is going to be taking charge. And I want to see actually if I would want to alter what I'm going to say if I could have a bit of a broader perspective essentially. So a perspective here would be that if I sat peacefully in front of the person and they had to be rude to me, and I had been very nice. So you say like, aren't you cold? And then let's say, for example, they say to you, no, I'm wearing like shoes. Are you stupid? Or something like that. And then suddenly you're triggered, you know? I say, well, I just got called stupid. This is not a great thing. And immediately you feel very defensive and you want to now reestablish that you're not stupid. And that in itself is this snowball of reaction. And the thing is that, of course, all of us will say, we can get very attached to that and say, okay, well, this is going to now, we're going to create something around this to change this. We don't want to be stupid. The unfortunate thing that we forget straight away is that we're not stupid. And B, just because someone says we're stupid doesn't instantly make us stupid. But if we're able to just analyze that just for a quick moment, instead of reacting, catching the apple essentially, we can decide whether it's healthy to catch the apple or not. And maybe the apple was meant to fall straight on the ground. Maybe it wasn't supposed to impact you the way that the person intended to throw it at you. And at that point, I could say to myself, oh, my apologies. I didn't see that you were wearing shoes. I just didn't want you to get cold because I care for you. And at that point, instead of saying, oh, why are you calling me stupid? Like I'm not, analyzing every inch of you. There's tons of things that I could say. But as I would say, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. There's an instant where we need to realize, is it important for me to stay in character essentially? Or is it important for me to have peace within myself? What's more important? Because the peace is actually essentially what we're trying to maintain. The joy is something we're trying to create outside of that. And at that point, you're definitely not seeking that out. If you take a moment to analyze and say, well, in an hour from now, who would I like to reflect on? Who would I like to reflect on that dealt with that moment? Who would I appreciate in that moment? You'll see that you wouldn't appreciate yourself for retaliating with an equal amount of hatred or nastiness back at the person. You would actually rather appreciate someone who was a lot more selfless in the moment and that could have just brushed it off. And in fact, once you've analyzed past that point of yourself, you can actually start to extend that understanding into the person in front of you. And you can say, I wonder what kind of day they've had for them to be so nasty to me after I was so nice. So there's now a next level of extension of the analytical part where you could take a moment, not only assess who you are and how you're going to react, but you could also assess how the person was in front of you, how they're going to react towards you. And the thing is that we can say to ourselves, these things don't affect us. But when we go home and we've been to a social gathering and someone called us stupid and maybe half of the room laughed or something like that, it's a moment that's going to, whether you like it or not, I certainly believe it's going to affect you physically in your life. All of these things, the way we speak to each other, the way we speak to ourselves, the most important thing is going to affect you later on in life. Because at that point, if you go to bed thinking to yourself, there's something I need to fix about myself because I must be stupid, you are accepting that sickness. You are accepting that doubt. You're accepting that illness, actually, so to speak. And your body, yourself, you start to reject who you are, needing more of something that you have no idea of because you were called stupid or because you were called something. But I tell you what, if you had taken a moment to think to yourself, they're human too. They could have had a terrible day. They could have gotten up on the wrong side of the pillow, stepped on Lego, splashed the coffee on their lap, or texted the wrong emoji to their boss this morning. You'll realize that there are tons of reasons why they could have just lashed out at you rather than you becoming corrosive to yourself and going to bed saying, there's something wrong with me. There's a huge amount of that happens in this world too, is where people will not turn around and say, sorry, I lashed out at you there. I was just upset about something and I didn't actually differentiate between that moment and now me replying to you. If someone is miraculously in the space to do that, you have a very good, honest, beautiful friend. But in most cases, other people don't even know why they are reacting the way they're reacting, because they're very much stuck in their character. And like I said, these things don't pitch up into our physical well-being instantly. You don't wake up the next morning with a broken finger because someone said that your finger looked a little bit funny and you decided to reject that part of yourself. But with time, the way that you tend to care from it on an energetical level, meaning the way that you perceive yourself, is going to affect your physical self very, very much so. Then you're going to consider yourself lesser and rather disconnect yourself from yourself. And funny enough, I mean, I know a lot of people have things to say about social media and everything, and everything can be great, but the potential for greatness is not just good. Greatness can also be bad. You can do great things that are terribly, terribly bad. And social media has that same potential. It has the greatness to bring people together and to pull awareness to oneself, but it can also pull negative awareness. You can take a look at social media and say, well, why don't I look like those guys or those girls? And straight away, just that moment, depending on how you look at it, really, you can start to create a very corrosive attitude towards yourself, wishing more than something that's already a miracle. That's something that's really beautiful to think of, is that you're already a miracle for exactly the way you are. Even if you feel like you're missing something, even if society says you're missing a whole bunch of things, you are already a miracle. So at the end of the day, for people to try and evaluate themselves against someone else, you need to understand that you're only looking at a very small side of the scale and saying, wow, but they have very beautiful skin, or a very beautiful body, or very beautiful eyes, or whatever it may be. Just understand that we weren't all supposed to, or we're not all supposed to have beautiful aspects of ourselves that are measured on the exact same little section of the scale. You have beautiful things about you that you should be working on, that you should be manifesting, you should be thanking yourself for, that you should be thanking your energy for at the end of the day. But we don't spend our time doing that. We spend our time rather corrosively looking for things that are wrong, thinking that that's how we're going to fix things, by looking at things from a point of wrong. That's exactly how you just keep that sickness around. Essentially, someone once said this, is to say, instead of when you're ill, someone says, how are you doing? Instead of saying, I'm sick at the moment, say, I'm getting better. You can acknowledge that you're not in a good place, but you can acknowledge your path to goodness at the same time. Your physical self and your emotional self, they're not disconnected in any way. You might be able to say to your friends, oh, well, this body of mine, and my terrible back, and my this and my that, and it sounds all great and fine, but in actual fact, these are very corrosive things to be looking at oneself for and about. So through my life, I found that analyzing how I was taking my perspective towards myself, both in social moments with how I dealt with other people, and how I then dealt with myself afterwards, it made me understand a perspective where I could say to myself, well, I'm not that I'm not that bad, but it's actually I'm a really good being if I take the time to understand that. I'm a really good being to take the time to understand that, and it's by not reacting the way that I would have reacted before with a very corrosive character. Because my corrosive character wanted the Ferrari, my corrosive character wanted the big Lani house, my corrosive character was very much involved with all the egotistical things, because an egotistical self is very much prepared for a corrosive world. But if you take a look at the potential for this world, just like the potential for social media and things like that, you'll see that actually this world is beautiful in many ways, just like you are. This world is absolutely abundant in so many ways, just like you are. But it's how you decide to look at it. That's going to manifest your relationship with both the world, with both your social media, importantly, with yourself. And that creates your health, essentially. That is very much, for me, the essence of that health. And if you have that ability, for example, to walk into a supermarket and have the moment, I know it's going to sound silly, but to turn the packet around and say, I wonder what's in the food, immediately you're also respecting your body on a level that other people don't. You will acknowledge that to yourself. Whether you will keep it in your conscious mind, subconsciously, you'll very much acknowledge just how much more respectful you are to yourself. If you take the time to, and it's not saying that you have to, type in on Dr. Google and go absolutely crazy on this. This is all within your own time. Is you can unravel it slowly, find out what's good for you on every different level you might hope to think, and let that unfold and let that be a part of who you are. And to understand that if you're going through something and you're sick, understand that that's something that needs to take place essentially. That's something that's a message to you, and you can't just keep declining these messages. You can't just keep saying, I don't need to hear this. I don't want to hear this. I tell you, the body will do nothing but send it back tenfold. It will keep sending it back and back and say, you didn't get the message. I'm sending it straight back to you, because you do need to get the message at the end of the day. No amount of these pills is going to do anything for you. And a lot of people will say, but Ryan, Western medicine has been shown to give us all of these benefits and everything. How can you dispute these things? I'm not saying that Western medicines or medicines are bad. Sometimes our bodies are at such a state that pain, for example, and fear, we need something, or we could sure do with something to help us get to a point where we could filter through these crazy minefields of understanding oneself. However, understanding that that is not the only place or the place to fix everything. That's not the foundation. That's just the rooftop or the shingles of this entire thing. You're actually needing to go down to the foundation. And if you keep feeling like every earthquake or every little movement is shaking your entire structure to, decimation and destruction, then you need to understand that your attachment and your foundation, or how you built yourself, you need to rethink it. Yes.
Sorry, Ryan, could you maybe explain what you mean by the foundation? I love holistically everything you've said. I think speaks to the fact of why there are many very sick people with autoimmune diseases and cancer so prolific. And I've been sick a large part of my life because I did not come. I came to the realization of this journey, but I was unable to get to deep unconscious revelations and healing, and therefore physical health, as quickly as you obviously did. It obviously happened quite fast. So just now I'd love you to tell us, how quickly did your physical body start turning around? But I love the fact that you've pulled in two factors here that don't often come into the mix. And the one is, you talked about analyzing yourself to help yourself look at the foundation that was faulty and change it. So that means you engage your mind to help yourself heal. But the mind also is the very thing that can be the toxic part that makes us sick. So I'm assuming that what you spoke about here is a balance where you can go, you engage your mind, that analytical part of you doesn't have to be thrown out. You don't have to be all zen and not human. But when you engage that mind, you get the insight, but you don't get stuck in the perpetual cycle that some of us can, of beating up on yourself, or being triggered all the time. So it's a balance, actually. So you've been able quite quickly, obviously, to engage the mind, analyze it, but not stick in the drama of it, and bring yourself back into balance. And I think that's a very valuable insight you bring to us. And the other about the mind, because I think often when we talk about the death of the ego, or integration of the ego and divine self, which is essentially your journey to healing, people think we have to annihilate the ego, and we have to not be so human and in our bodies. So I love the other thing that you brought, and it's just been bigger and bigger for me. I've taken much longer than you, but that's fine. We're all different. Is that all of us. It's about integration of all of us. It's not about fixing the bad bits or having to remedy XYZ. Yes, there are things we need to change once we do the self-reflection to become this person that has a strong foundation and not just a good roof. But it's the full acceptance of ourselves. I think that's what you brought, which is very big. And because the self-criticism that's leading to the illness can, for me, started perpetuating even more the more I did this inner work, because of my past trauma or whatever. I had a lot of very ooky stuff unconsciously, and that's why it's taken me much longer. So I unfortunately fell into a trap of getting habitually on that thought process, although I thought I'd already healed it, of self beration and criticism. And I struggled to get off that for a while. And that's why I became sick again recently. So, sorry, that was an interjection, but I just wanted to give the perspective, because those are two things that are astounding. How long did it take you to get your health back on track? Because obviously this process you're talking about, for me, I've been already on an 8-year journey. Obviously yours was quite quick. It's different for different people, but how quickly did your body start responding once you started having these insights and doing this inner work and creating a stronger foundation?
So, one of the interesting things that I can say is that, firstly, it was something that was rather not, like, let's just say, compared to Western medicine, where it would be, within 3 weeks, you'll feel these effects, and then it'll take another week of this, and then you'll feel like this. It was rather being able to breathe in or soak in aspects of myself and then exhale a toxic essence of myself. And what I could say is that this took a long time for me to get right, because I can say right now I still don't have it right, if that could make any sense to anyone. In fact, I will say, in the strangest of ways, it's part of this entire journey for us to not be fixed or anything. This is part of our journey to be like this, in many ways, but not to the extent, like you said, to be stuck in the one extreme or the other. And the extreme of one's divine self and one's extreme of one's ego, and both sides of these, peaceful versus chasing joy side, essentially there is a balance to be found, of course. The fact is that we are supposed to, or at least I found there was nothing wrong with any of these sides, but it's about not getting stuck and deciding that there is a particular spot to be in, because there is such an ever so changing world and environment, and so many different aspects for us to do. Peace again, where I felt like I was on a good path. It took me, let's say, a good 3 to 6 months, and I'll say 3 to 6 months, that's pretty broad. But I say that because it took me time to feel that I was having change within myself, which took a good 3 months on, because I didn't just say, oh, that's it, that's what I should do, I'll start there. It was more a sense of me saying, okay, I'm going to start with this and I'm going to see how it works. And I was very nervous to begin with, just like when you take your first pills of whatever, antibiotics or anything, then you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, whew, I hope this is going to work. It was very much just, let's take this step. And I took the step to start analyzing myself in the social environments and in my everyday environments. And I found that slowly but surely, it was easier for me to pick out. That's a characteristic part of me. That's my character. That's my mask. And that's what I would rather have said if I was very just unfiltered and kind and pure in that way. And I found that there was a much more natural draw for me to be kind and nurturing, whereas that the mean side of myself, or let's say the more defensive side of myself, was very much found in my character building and my mask building, because it was an alert of the world is dangerous, Ryan, defend yourself, be a hardcore character, Ryan, because you need to be a hardcore character. And this is also why I say that there is, for example, I can't say that I just sit on a holistic side or a side of myself that's just a complete zen. I'm not hovering off of the ground here. Is that at the end of the day, there is very much times where one has to put one's foot down sometimes and say, hey, that's enough. I don't like this. I do not accept this. And we don't live in a world where everyone sees and understands and connects on that holistic level. So if there was, it would be very quick and efficient and there would be no need. But sometimes, unfortunately, it gets to the point where one needs to put one's foot down quite harshly, maybe. I can say one thing, though, is that my foot, in terms of the way that I put it down these days, hasn't gone to the extent where I feel like I want to just smack someone over the back of the head or just say, hey, wake up, you fool, you idiot. Like I don't feel that way anymore. I just rather get to a point where I'll say, shame, whatever happened to you, I'm sorry, just subconsciously I think to myself this. It's rather sad that you're at this point in your life, because you could be a beautiful person, or in a beautiful space, because you are a beautiful person, but you're just being very mean and terrible right now. So I'll say to the person, I've had enough. Sorry, I'm not going to continue this conversation with you. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go now, and I hope that whatever unresolved situation you have in your life, you learn to isolate it, you learn to understand it, and I hope that you learn to learn yourself before you are so corrosive to other people. And I walk away very glad that I have that headspace, because I could have taken that internally, gone home and internalized it, and I could have just let that very corrosive side of that person continue through me. And this is why I say that I'll never be completely at a point of holistic self, is because I care for people. I care for people where they are. That's why we are all connected in that way. So when someone comes to us and is mean, understand that the peace that's disrupted in you has got nothing to do with the fact that or a thought that there's something wrong with you. But if that person was mean to you, there's something wrong with them in terms of the fact that they're hurt. There's something sad going on in their life. There's something upsetting happening to them.
Sorry, Ryan, I am interjecting, but I'm pulling out threads that are absolute gold. So we did a whole episode on boundaries and autonomy and how they relate to our health. And so the thread I want to pull out here is, yes, it's amazing to catch oneself and know you're in character rather than in real self. But it's also amazing that you have chosen at times to draw boundaries and stand in your own autonomy, knowing what's right for you, what you need, and to draw a boundary in a kind but firm way. And what Gabor Mate and PNI, applied psychoneuroimmunology, is showing that illness, a lot of cancers and chronic illness, life-threatening, is coming from that thing is big in people's marriages, relationships, where and it's been a big thing for me to be authentic, to actually say, I know who I am and what I want, and it's okay for me to say that and to draw a boundary. So thank you for bringing that to us as a real live example, that that's an important part of staying healthy and healing.
Well, just like you said now, those boundaries are essentially part of the foundation that you need to draw. That's very important, because from there you start to create very much a real sense of you. Walls that are created that are very much then a true expression of you. So you could imagine your foundation very much like a house foundation drawn into the sand, let's say. And whatever grows from there and whatever comes up from there will always reflect this line you've drawn in the sand below, this footprint. And essentially it's the fact that, like I said, our feet are not hovering off of the ground. We do not have any sort of point that we reach where it's just click and now we are wholesome beings forever. the fact is that there's a balance to be found, because every single day that balance is something that we seek to fulfill, essentially. And every day is a day to fulfill oneself and to connect oneself. And the fact is that we have both that dark side and that good side living within us the entire time. And that is something that if you are going to reject that, you are going to miss out a huge part of your vital foundation. Vital foundation, meaning that foundation, you saying, oh, I'm just a little goody two shoes. The funniest thing is that, and I'm just saying from a brief little experience of my own life, is that I found that the people with the goody two shoes things, a lot of the time, when eventually something happens and they get pushed to the limit, a very, very good girl, a very good guy, living a very good life, they're going ahead and they have their heart broken, or get betrayed by a best friend or something like that, or lose something so dear to them. I've seen the extreme come out of them, and then they do not recognize themselves all of a sudden. But there's an important side of, if they had recognized that from the beginning, and I'm not saying now on a criticizing level, I'm just saying on an idealistic scenario, if they had to have known that there was good for them to acknowledge that, then
Yeah.
they would have seen that that's vital to keep there. They wouldn't have betrayed that.
Yeah, the thing is that it's unconscious and it's suppressed. So that was my realization. One of the big realizations is that I had suppressed emotion. I was one of those good girls, and I didn't even know that. It was just such a natural behavior for me. So that creates people pleasing, codependency. You're not being authentic, etc., etc. And everybody loves you and you do good work in the world even, but at some point, as you say, that unconscious stuff, it's like a volcano, it pops. So that's why I can't remember if it was Freud or Jung said, until you bring the unconscious to the conscious, it's going to run your life and you're going to think it's fate, and it's going to make you sick. So people don't know what they don't know. So a large part of our mission on this podcast is to bring to people what they may not know, because I didn't know it and I didn't know it. So once these things come up and they start revealing themselves, that's where your healing lies. But sometimes it requires great change in your life, actually, and an acceptance of all of you, and that maybe not being the good girl and sometimes being the bad girl is the very thing, the godly thing to do and the healthy thing to do. And so maybe that we should segue into, we might have to have some more conversations about this foundation, actually. But maybe you could speak a little bit more to the foundation, because we're going to run out of time just now. What exactly do you mean by building this foundation, and what is your foundation now, and how did it change your life? Because you're very young, and it takes, most of us only make very big changes like me when we get very, very ill to the point of terminal cancer, or we become bankrupt, and here you are yes, you got very sick, but you transformed. You seem to have created a foundation and changed your life quite radically, quite rapidly in inverted commas. Okay. So can you speak to the foundation and what changes has that brought to your life?
Okay, so definitely, I think something that I'll refer to as my sickness or my illness that was shocking to me, and I will say that I have so much respect for the journey you've been through. I can't for a second say that I would handle it anything of the same as you. And at this level of strength you have, for example, the scale, and that's why I say we're also very different, but the kinds of pains that we're able to take on, it can be so different. And within that foundation, I'll say for me, instead of my life, let's say, being threatened in that kind of way, I understood at that moment when I was sick, physically ill, and when I got to the real realization that it had everything to do with my physical self, but one and the same, it had everything to do with how I dealt with myself as well, from a perspective, from a, yeah, I'll say a holistic point of view, but just how I perceived myself, how I treated myself emotionally. When I realized that that was not one and the same, for me, that was, it's going to sound really silly, but for me, that was the thing that was life itself. And for me, I thought, if that is corrupt for me now, then how could I ever hope to be a good father? How could I ever hope to be a good leader, however, to my small little family that I would love to have one day? That's, I think a lot of other people would say that their big dream would be to, the car and the house and this and that. But for me, it would be to have a beautiful experience, not a good one, not a peaceful one without any pain or anything like that. Of course, we all wish that, but a beautiful one. And if that means that I have to have pain, which is something that I've come to learn too, it comes hand in hand, is that I need to ask for just that then, and I need to be really, really wholesome within that. So I really felt like I was losing grip of my life, whether it was that it was going to be, and I know it sounds silly, but then at that point you do realize that then eventually this will catch up to me and I will lose the very physicality of that life too. You realize that because they are one and the same, they just don't operate, let's say, at the exact same time, meaning that like they don't fix themselves in these instant ways like thoughts do, where you can come to an understanding, you can conceptualize things and say, okay, well, because I conceptually understand this, my body is now going to conceptually just change. It's not going to just realign itself. It's going to take time. And that's where I say that one of the biggest parts of this is the trust within the foundation, is that you need to have trust. You need to actually trust yourself. And in order for you to trust yourself, you actually need to practice these things. You need to continuously practice these things, these good things. When I say good things, I say balanced things in your life. And by understanding that trust and being able to say to yourself, this is a necessary, not just good, but this is a necessary part of myself, and that I can trust myself to take on these things, then you can find yourself actually reaching a point of balance. A way that I could describe this is, for example, I recently went to a talk that spoke about autism, for example, and we got educated on it. And one of the speakers said that a lot of the mothers tend to distance themselves from their child because they get upset. They get upset sometimes, and they get to the point where they go, yo, I just want to give you such a hiding because you're tiring me out and I'm so tired. And inevitably it's going to happen. We're going to get tired. We're going to get beaten down. But it's that point where you say to yourself, oh, I'm so wrong, and there's something wrong with me for feeling this way. And that's what I'm going to come back to, is I'm going to say that it was, in fact, I had to accept the fact that I was both the knife and the brush in my life. And that I needed to understand that I had the knife and the brush to begin with. That is who I am. And by throwing the knife away, I threw the brush away too. And the fact is that they are actually on the exact same handle at the end of the day. And in fact, just like a rhino horn is entirely made out of hair, we can understand that our creative self is almost like that brush. It can sharpen into a ivory knife, or it could be the smoothest brush you've ever felt. And the fact is that you need to understand that you have both the potential for both. And when you have a bad thought like, I just want to smack this person over the back of the head, understand that that's not like, oh, now I don't belong here anymore, I need to go to the naughty corner forever. That's not actually a full understanding of it. That's you trying to either float and hover above ground, or you deciding that you belong underground in the weirdest of ways. Is to say, no, you belong grounded. You need to stand on this earth. You need to stand there, be grounded, and understand who you are, that you have both the knife and the brush in your hand. And if you understand that it's you that's holding the knife, you can understand you're the only one who can sheath it. You're the only one who can actually put it away. And the fact is that if you carry on saying, I'm going to deny life, you don't realize you're the one holding the knife. You're carrying on with all of the corrosive cutting and things in the places where it shouldn't happen. But some of the most beautiful art comes from, let's say, carving of statues and beautiful artworks and things like that, they use very sharp objects that are capable of a lot of harm, but it's used for creativeness instead. And you need to understand that by rejecting the bad sides of yourself, you're not
Correct.
embracing your full self. You're not embracing the full self. So you're deciding that there's bad parts of you. Meanwhile, those are just potential parts of you. Those are just parts of you that you can learn to accept and you
Mhm.
can redirect them. It's an inevitable energy that's rising through you. And you can say to yourself, okay, I'm not wrong for feeling this way. It's natural for me to be angry for what they said and for me to turn into a knife all of a sudden. But cutting them is wrong. Yes, you're right. Don't cut them. Do not
Yeah.
cut them. Is it rather to understand that even though you turn into a knife instantly, you need to have the conscious ability to relax yourself back into a brush and say,
Mhm.
this is what I would like to be right now, not the knife. I don't want to be the knife right now. And there will be times where you definitely will need to be a knife. But you will learn when it is right and when it is wrong. You'll understand that. I think we're all born with that, a compass of knowing not just right and wrong, but knowing a perspective of what we want to be at peace with at the end. Are you going to be at peace with the surrounding that you have? And that was that education versus educas version, was to know that education could very much be a powerful sword, compiling all of these understandings onto each other, onto each other, onto each other. You can cut your way through the brushways of life and you could cut through the jungle and find the ancient temple. But at the end of the day, if you learned that maybe that wasn't the right way to take it on, maybe there was a peaceful way to go through the jungle, and maybe you could have learned to make peace with the jungle and find the temple at the very same time, because no one better to lead you to the temple than the jungle itself, if the temple's hidden inside of the jungle, let's say. So
Amazing.
that's where I would come to that point and say that the balance of oneself, or me understanding myself day to day, is very much walking out of the door, taking a deep breath and saying, I'm both the knife and the brush, but
Amazing.
I'll decide which part of myself penetrates the world, which part of myself is going to affect the world. And I will take conscious effort every day, every waking moment to be a part of that. That's very, very difficult. And I think that that's also why
Mhm.
it's very rewarding. That's why life in every single day is so rewarding, is because it is never going to get easier. It's just going to get more beautiful. That's just the main truth of it, is that it doesn't get
Yep.
easier for me to contain those things. It just becomes more beautiful for me to feel the emotion rush through me, and then within
Mhm.
that shaking moment of anger to say, I can't speak to you, lots of love, I'll chat to you later, something like that, rather
Yeah.
than me just lashing out because the person is trying so hard to pull that sword out of that sheath and just say,
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
what, I'll tell you something. Then
Mhm.
that's not at all who I want to be. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, Ryan. I did put my hand up there, but I think that that is really astounding way to end. Maybe I think you have so much more to offer us, but I think that there's been so much in your journey and your wisdom that you've brought, that I think there's a lot for people to chew on. And I just love how you ended with the knife and the brush and the jungle, and that it's difficult because that's the other thing we've been socialized and spiritualized to believe, and self-help lies, is that it's quick fix and it's going to be blissful. And actually the journey to, yeah, to true self and to the best life is, it takes work and it takes time and it's actually not easy, but the rewards are huge. So your analogies are beautiful, your examples are beautiful, you are an astounding teacher and healer. So if there's any way people can contact you, you can tell me now. If there's work that you do, I met you in a health shop. I don't even know anything about you more than all of this, but otherwise in future, I hope you will be doing stuff. Maybe we could just end off with a quick explanation of the difference between education and educas, because you explained that in the end, how important that is. And with one tiny little pearl of wisdom, because we're already over an hour, so I want to wrap it up, but I'd love to wrap it up in that way, if that's okay for you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, I guess just like you, I think I could go on forever because this just streams through all the different parts of life. But yes, the one of the main things that shifted, let's say, my way of thinking was very much the difference between education and the ancient term that education came from, which is educas. And education is very much an accumulation of knowledge and skills that one will gather and hoard together to create one's sense of self and one's different applications towards the world. So basically your skill set and your character, essentially. But that is it, full stop. There's no, in the name of what, essentially, why are you doing it? That's entirely missing. Ways that in educas, it's very much to broaden one's mind from within to achieve everything that one desires or its equivalents without disturbing the peace of others. And I love the fact that it said that we must chase everything we desire. So you're not wrong for who you are, but it might not be what you desire that you get, but it will be its equivalence. That's something very powerful. And never mind that, but then on top of it, you'll get to do that without disturbing the peace of others. And that's the thing, is that if you got gifted a house and you were so blessed and happy to get your dream home, but then you find out that they had to kick another family out of their own dream home, how would you enjoy that house for the rest of your life? But if you got to know that that house was built from scratch just for you and no one was upset about it, that's a very different way of understanding your gift. So that's the big thing where I said, okay, well, how am I going to take on education? Essentially, how am I going to take in knowledge? And how important is this knowledge to me? And it became very much, is it going to be peaceful towards others? Is it going to have a balance towards the rest of the world that I'm very much connected to? It's so much more important than just me. This world is so much more important. And you'll find that because connecting to it just makes everything a lot easier and a lot more peaceful too.
Yeah, Ryan, you really are astounding, and I think this could be a much longer transmission, but I think we should wrap it up because you have brought so much and you've encapsulated it in your own personal journey. And I think it's so beautiful that you're young and that you got there much faster than someone like me, because I think one of the things that puts people off often is, oh, do I really have to spend so many years? Well, some of us do, but it's not everybody's journey. And here's somebody sitting on the podcast saying, well, it took time, but he's talking about 3 to 6 months being a long time. I've been on a lifetime's journey, and it's a never-ending journey. So, Ryan, I want to thank you and thank Providence for connecting us, and we will carry on connecting. And I would encourage you and support you to keep on taking this out to the world because it's gold. So thank you and bless you. And if anybody has any questions or anything they want to ask Ryan or engage with Ryan, you can do so in the comments on YouTube. You can drop Loretta or an email and we'll pass it on, or you can also comment on any one of our podcast channels. So with that, we say goodbye. Thank you to whoever listened to this. And I know there is value beyond value in this, so please share it. We found that the best way to share something with someone is to send them a link on WhatsApp. Don't just tell them to go to the podcast. We have nothing to gain by sharing this except maybe bringing to someone an awareness of what they didn't know. And that was certainly the starting point of my journey to healing, and it sounds like it was Ryan's. So thank you, Ryan. Bless you. There's more to come. I know that for sure. Bye-bye.
Bye bye bye.